हमारा बैक टू बैक चल रहा है आज।
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm just figuring where my book has gone.
Okay, because I was wondering what was coming on the screen.
Yeah, I couldn't find the
There.
book. How are you doing?
Good, good, all good. So actually, it's very interesting. We are doing, our main focus, the core group has been doing this home study of the Bhagavad Gita, which is 9 volumes,
Wow.
I told you it's a commentary on Adi Shankara's commentary of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay. So what he does in a commentary is he takes every verse and he explains what it means, because Sanskrit being a contextual language, so he relates it and explains why it has to mean this and not that, for example.
Right.
Only because this is the context, this is what went on in the verse previous, and that's what's coming next. So that's why a commentary, what they call a karika, becomes very, very exhaustive, and his is Adi Shankara's is very exhaustive. So Pujya Swamiji did a commentary on that. So it has a lot of, it's not just a simple reading of the Gita, it also explains to you a lot of the deeper concepts of Vedanta as you go along.
Right.
For example, there is something called a Vivarta Upadana Karna and Parinami Upadana Karna. I'm just giving you examples,
Right.
Now you need to understand those concepts properly. Chapter 7 was full of technical terms.
Okay.
So anyway, we've been doing that. We're now on chapter 10, which is very simple because it's a lot of description of what is already there in the Bhagavatam and the Puranas and all. It's more story form right now. And I think even chapter 11 is going to be more, but then I think again it gets heavy and pure Vedanta comes in one of the later chapters again. But like chapter 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 were all quite, even 9, I think, quite intense. So we've been doing that on Thursdays. So that happens every Thursday evening. But we're also doing another text called Kaivalya Upanishad. And there are a lot of newcomers in the group now.
Upanishad, really? Can I join it?
You can, there's not a problem. I'll send you the link. It was on Tuesdays. But
Okay.
what she has done, because there are newcomers, my
Right.
teacher doing a lot of background or, fundamental, the foundations she's trying to make clear to these people. So interestingly enough, she started with Purushartha Nishchaya. That means to be very clear of what your goal in life is.
Right.
What
Right.
we have also done here. Then
Yeah.
she goes on to talk about Purushartha Nishchay goes on to what is the adhikaritvam, what are the qualifications,
Yes.
how you need mental maturity, emotional maturity, and also she hasn't even started the Upanishad yet.
I think we've done this in the Treatise of Vedanta or some, I'm forgetting, we've done this in some book.
Tattva Bodha has it. In fact, there it's going to come, I think, the next chapter, because what Swamiji's done is he's taken the basic fundamentals
Right.
and added parts of, and then it goes on to Tattva Bodha, because you see, it explains what your three bodies are. We are supposed to, you see, in Vedanta, they use what they call prakriyas, which are teaching models.
Right.
To explain the concepts to you. So there is one which talks about our three bodies. You don't know if you heard about Sharira Trayam. Have you?
Sharira Prayam, no, I haven't heard.
Okay, so we are supposedly, it says there are three bodies. There is the gross
Right.
body, which is called the Sthula Shariram.
Yeah, subtle body.
Then there's the subtle body. Now that Sukshma Shariram is where the mind is.
Right.
And the mind travels life after life, because when you die, it's the Sukshma Shariram, I would say, is the medium by which consciousness is manifest.
Right.
So when that leaves the body, even though consciousness is all pervading, it cannot manifest in the body, and it's called a dead body.
Oh, okay.
That is how you do, they say you die. Now the prana shut down, there's a whole process to it. And then the Sukshma Sharira detaches. Once that detaches, the body is still there, the eyes are still there, the ears are still there. You can't see, you can't hear, nothing, because consciousness is gone.
Right.
So the brain is in your skull, but your mind is in the Sukshma Sharira. And that mind has a conscious and a subconscious part. And all your vasanas and samskaras are stored there, which is why people remember past lives occasionally, which is why you have a particular nature, a particular traits that you have,
Right.
because your Sukshma Sharira has in its unconscious component. I told you, I think once, no, that the mind has four functional divisions. So Chitta is the memory bit of it. In that memory, the subconscious memory and the conscious memory, all the experiences of all your lives are stored.
Mm.
And a lot of those experiences and interactions are what determine your nature. And all your vasanas are stored there also, like what they say. The interesting thing is, in your Sukshma Shariram, because you have lived countless lives, there are all kinds of samskaras there. There are all kinds of memories. There are all potentials over there also. What will manifest in each life is dependent on the prarabdha karma for that life. In this life, you may be a musical genius because you have that ability there. But
Right.
it may not happen in some other life, or it may not even happen in this life.
Mm.
So whatever each of us has in terms of our either qualities or character traits are what are manifesting in this particular life as per your prarabdha karma, out of your memories and your karma account, of course. So it's, these are teaching models. As we go further in this book, you'll understand about the causal body also. So after Bhakti, I think there's 1 or 2 chapters. Then he comes into what are the next chapter is Sadhana Chatushtayam, which are qualifications. What qualifies a person to be what they call an adhikari, a person who can come to Vedanta, because you need a certain maturity of mind. You should have been a karma yogi, because it's in life that you get rubbed with experiences, with interactions, with relationships. And that is a maturing process. That's why karma yoga is so important. It teaches you acceptance of whatever is happening. So she's going over those parts right now because there are a lot of newcomers. So we've already have 5 classes and we still haven't. If you want, I will send you the recordings.
Yes, recordings, if possible, in the sessions also, if they can.
No, I'll send you the code. I'll send you the Zoom. It is at on Tuesdays. Today is, of course, Gita class.
Yeah.
But on Tuesdays at 5:30 is when the Cavalier class happens.
Perfect.
I'll send you the meeting code. It's very simple, 999-234-9999, and password is 999.
I'll still wait. I'll message you for the code. I'll want to
I'll
learn.
message, and also I will send you like yesterday. I mean, Tuesday's class was very interesting.
Yeah.
So these are basically the preparatory classes. Again, they're dealing with a bit with what we have been doing also, in terms of how to prepare the mind. So I'll send you 2-3 classes, which will give you a sense of what the class is about. Okay.
That'd be great.
And listen to them. It'll listen to them because Tuesday's class, I listened to again yesterday. Sometimes, when you're on gallery view, you see watching other people, you don't always listen. But when I do a vision and take my notes, that's when I realize that even Tuesday's class was actually very useful.
Wow.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for adding that light to my life. Really. Thank you so much.
No, sorry, I took up so much of your time now.
No. You enriched me so much, Dimpleji. Thank you so much, Dimples. Really appreciate it. Okay. So thank you for listening to us. And then now, both of us will start the chapter. Today is about Bhakti.
Yeah.
Chapter 7, Bhakti. Now I will deal with the topic of Bhakti. It is a very important topic found in the scriptures and a topic with various shades of meanings in different contexts. Therefore, it is a confusing topic also. We should clearly understand what Bhakti is. The word Bhakti is used in the scriptures in 2 different meanings. The first meaning of Bhakti means devotion towards God. Devotion is love directed towards a higher principle. Reverential love can be defined as devotion. We talk about Matra Bhakti and Pitra Bhakti. In our tradition, we also look upon the parents as worthy of worship. Similarly, we talk about Guru Bhakti, Desh Bhakti, and Ishwar Bhakti. Therefore, in general, Bhakti is love towards a higher principle, especially love towards God. The 3 directions of love. The topic of love has been very elaborately analyzed in our scriptures, both in its general form as love and also in its specific form as love for God. Scriptures point out that all forms of love that a human being entertains are directed towards only 3 things. The first one is love for goal. Whatever goals or ends we want to accomplish in life are all ends that we love. It is because we love them that we want to acquire them. So I will call love towards various ends or various goals end love. Then to accomplish the ends, we have to use various means. Only through means can we accomplish the ends. Since the means are useful to accomplish the ends, we love the means also. Why? Because it is useful to accomplish the end. Therefore, the second direction of our love is love for the means. I will call it means love. The third object of love is oneself. Everyone loves himself or herself. I will call it self-love. Therefore, all forms of love are only of 3 categories: means love, end love, and self-love. This is love in general. Gradation of love. The scriptures point out that there is a gradation in the intensity of these 3 forms of love. Love for the means is the least in its intensity. Love for the end is medium, and love for oneself is the highest form of love, wherein the love has got the highest intensity. What is the reason? Reason is simple. Love for the means is not for the sake of means itself. It is only for the sake of the end. Once the end is accomplished, the attitude towards the means is completely different. After accomplishing the end, the means is often forgotten. Rich people are loved more than the poor people because they are the means for the end called wealth. As long as the end called wealth can be accomplished through these rich people, they are loved. The moment money goes from them, thereafter, that person is not approached. Elderly rich people are very sincerely served by family members. You know where the sincerity lies. I don't generalize it. Often the service is with the hope that they can inherit or get the wealth. Suppose the elderly person gives off all the money before death itself. After getting all the money, the old person is deserted. He advises other old friends never to give the money to the next generation until death. Yavad vitoparjan sakta tavani japaru varo rakta paskad
Paschat.
jivat paschat, yeah, the hyphen is there on top. Paschat jivati jar jara dehe vartam kopi na prachati gehe.
Basically, it's only saying, don't give your money up before you die.
Yeah. So it means as long as a person is earning and supporting his family, they will shower him with love and affection. But when he becomes old and sick, nobody even wants to have a word with him. Most of the time, love for people is purely the love for the means to accomplish the end. And often money is the end. Therefore, the love for the end is superior for the love of the means. If means is dear to you, the end is dear to you. Now, between the love for the end and oneself, which love is superior? If you logically analyze, I love various ends not for the sake of the end itself. I love various ends hoping that they will give me comfort, security, happiness. It is for my benefit, my comfort, my security, my happiness. I love various ends. The moment I see that a particular end does not give me joy, then the end is changed. Even after accomplishing the end, it is disposed of. This is why even marriages break down nowadays. Couples who choose each other get separated. Loved ones are rejected when they are found uncomfortable for oneself. So the self is the dearest. The Upanishad says, nobody loves the husband for husband's sake. Everybody loves the husband for one's own sake. Nava are patyuho kamaya patiha priyo bhavati. Atmanastu kamaya patiha priyo bhavati. Therefore, no end is loved for the end's sake. Everything is loved for one's own sake only. So if you have to grade, means love is manda and love is madhyam and self-love is uttam. This is the general principle regarding human love.
Prachi, I'm going to just jump in here. I think this quote is from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. So I'll never forget, we were doing a workshop and it's quite a difficult Upanishad that was going over my head mostly, but Swami Sakshat, another Swami, gave a very good example of what he means, that how self-love is important. Actually, you even love somebody else. Why? Because they make you feel happy. It brings out what we call, quote unquote, the please self in you. And the day they don't give the please self, that's when you're prepared to move on to another person. That's how human nature is. So he gave a very good example of a rich man who loved his gold. He used to hoard it. Every time he made a lot of illicit, ill-gotten wealth, he would convert it into gold bars. And he had these bars stacked in a vault in his house. And he used to be, look at them very often and feel very happy. So one morning when he woke up, he found that there had been robbers in the house who had robbed him of all his gold, and the vault was lying open. And he was absolutely distraught because he couldn't bear the thought that his precious gold had gone. He was lamenting away and, really all set to have a meltdown virtually, when there was a knock at the door, and it turned out to be people from the income tax department or something who came to say that, we've come to raid you because we've heard that you have a lot of ill-gotten gold in your house. And they did the raid and they didn't find any gold. And then he's saying, oh, God, the gold is not here. So where's the love for the gold? The love is for yourself.
Right.
If you really love the gold, then, what is convenient is what you love. What makes you happy is what you love. So let's let's never beat about the bush. All love. The only exception I might make is a mother's love for a child. Every other love in this planet, be it love for clothes or books or cars, is love for your own self, basically. That's what he's saying.
Amazing. Absolutely grateful. Thank you so much. 3 grades of devotion. Now let's apply this in the field of God. If a person loves God, what will be the intensity of that love? Scriptures point out that the intensity of love depends upon how you look upon God. Because different people see God in different ways. The way you look upon God will determine the intensity of your love. Majority of people look upon God only as a means for various worldly ends. If I go to this temple, I will be able to accomplish this end. This is my approach. As long as you look upon a God as a means, that love is called Manda Bhakti, inferior devotion. That is why such people get angry with God also. Last week, a lady came and said, I am angry with God. I asked him to get my daughter married, but he didn't accomplish that. Therefore, I've stopped worshipping him and I've thrown all my prayer books into the waste paper basket. Why? Because it is a conditional love. If the condition is fulfilled, I love. If the condition is not fulfilled, I allow God to go. I reject. Therefore, such a bhakti is called Manda Bhakti. And this is the prevalent one. The next set of people is still rare. They don't look upon God as a means for various ends. They're mature enough. Their understanding of God is clearer. They're able to choose God as the end of life. The end of life means the goal of life. They know God represents security. God represents peace. God represents happiness. They know that everyone is seeking security, peace, and happiness alone. Naturally, their love for God is as the end, and therefore it is more intense than the previous one. Therefore, this bhakti is Madhyam Bhakti. You can extend this further and find out what will be Uttam Bhakti. What should be Uttam Bhakti? What is the third and rarest form of love, which is the most intense form of love? It is a love in which I look upon God neither as a means nor even as the end. The Lord and the self being identical. God love is equal to self-love. Still, self-love is the most intense love. That form of love is called Uttam Bhakti. For Manda Bhakti, God is dear. For Madhyam Bhakti, God is dearer. And for Uttam Bhakti, God is the dearest. Krishna beautifully elaborates this in the 7th and the 12th chapters of the Gita. Therefore, what is Bhakti? Love in the form of Manda, Madhyam, and Uttam Rupa. This is the first meaning of the word Bhakti.
Prachi, I'm again going to jump in. The reason
I think you don't have to say jump in. We need your bit, please.
Okay, now you have to understand this is going to the bottom line in Vedanta, okay? As we go further, you will slowly start understanding that what is Brahman? Brahman is only consciousness, right? Existence consciousness, Satchit Anand Atma. Now that consciousness is what gives you sentiency and makes you alive, okay? And it is that consciousness, as I was telling you, that goes with the Sukshma Shariram, because that is the manifesting medium for consciousness. And so basically what you are is consciousness. I think I told last class about how anything you can objectify is not you. You are actually consciousness, right? So the thing is that consciousness is the same consciousness as Paramatma, as Brahman. So when they say that self, you identify with the self, the fact is that what is giving us the sentiency to even operate as human beings is the same consciousness that we are worshipping as God. So that's why when you say this love for God equals self-love, you have to understand that all the Mahavakyas in the Vedanta, Tattvamasi, that thou art, all, there are so many Mahavakyas. They are equating you and saying you have the same consciousness as that consciousness, which is the cause of the Jagat Karna Brahman, okay, or Ishvara, whatever you want to say. That's why they're saying, he's explained that how, since self-love is most important to you, is the most powerful of all loves. If you can look upon God as yourself, or you as part of him, that will become self-love. That will be the most powerful. That's what he's trying to explain. You're not, it's not a transactional love where you want something,
right.
that is where the reference is to self-love, that God love is equal to self-love. But those only Gyanis know. We understand it academically, but we will still look upon God as different from us. For a Gyani, there is no dualism. He is the same. That's what Advaita is.
Right. How beautiful. Advaita. The second meaning of bhakti. Now we will come to the second meaning of the word bhakti. Bhakti is the course of discipline meant to accomplish the highest goal of life, namely moksha or freedom. To convey this idea of bhakti as a course of discipline, the word yoga is added. So when bhakti means a course of discipline, we use the word bhakti yoga. Therefore, the suffix yoga indicates bhakti as a course of discipline. Bhakti yoga, the threefold spiritual discipline. The next question is, what is bhakti yoga? What course of discipline is indicated by the word bhakti yoga? If you remember our previous talks, we have dealt with the threefold course of discipline for attaining Purusharth, the human goals. While talking about the threefold course of discipline, we talked about Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. We never talked about Bhakti Yoga. So the question is, what do you mean by Bhakti Yoga as a course of discipline? Is it a fourth yoga? Our answer is Bhakti Yoga is not an exclusive or separate course of discipline at all. Bhakti Yoga is the name of the entire group of discipline consisting of all the three. It is not a fourth one, but it is the name of the entire threefold course of discipline known as Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga. If you want, you can say that the first stage of Bhakti Yoga is Karma Yoga. The second stage of Bhakti Yoga is Upasana Yoga. The final stage of Bhakti Yoga is Jnana Yoga. It is one consisting of all these three. So Karma Yoga plus Upasana Yoga plus Jnana Yoga is equal to Bhakti Yoga. Then the next question is, why do you call all these three commonly as Bhakti Yoga? Why don't you treat it as a separate fourth yoga? The answer is, Bhakti Yoga is a common name for all the three because Bhakti is the common atmosphere in which all these three yogas are practiced. Karma Yoga has to be imbued with Bhakti. Upasana Yoga should be soaked in Bhakti, and Jnana Yoga must float in the syrup of Bhakti. In Karma Yoga, the attitude that one enjoys is that of dedicating all actions to the Lord and accepting without resistance all the consequences of the actions. How can there be Karma Yoga without Ishwar Arpana Bhavna and Prasad Bhavna? Therefore, a Karma Yogi should necessarily have Bhakti. In Upasana Yoga, I have to meditate upon the Lord for developing mental discipline and integration. How can I meditate upon God if I do not have Bhakti? Manasa Puja, Manasa Parayanam, and Manasa Japa are part of Upasana. So Upasana Yoga also must take place in the atmosphere of Bhakti alone. What about Jnana Yoga? Jnana Yoga also involves Bhakti. The study of scriptures is started with the prayer and we end with the prayer. Not only that, in Jnana Yoga, we are inquiring into our own real nature, discovering the identity of our real nature with the nature of God. Hence, Jnana Yoga involves self-discovery, which is none other than God discovery. Therefore, Jnana Yoga also involves Bhakti. So the second meaning of Bhakti is the entire course of spiritual discipline. Thus, the first meaning of Bhakti is the love for God in the form of Manda, Madhyam, and Uttam Prem. The second meaning of Bhakti is a course of discipline consisting of Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga, Jnana Yoga to attain the goal of liberation, the object of devotion. Now, I like to include one more topic in this context. Bhakti is love or devotion towards God. Without understanding the principle of God, how can we discuss the topic of devotion? The integral part of love is the object of love. In fact, you cannot develop love towards anyone without understanding who that one is. How can I love an unknown thing or person? That's why people want to move with a person to decide whether they can love or not. When they decide they can love, they get married. After marriage, they understand more and declare, I understand. That's why I am not able to love. So I can't talk of love for God without understanding, and that's why knowledge of God becomes necessary. Therefore, we will briefly discuss the nature of God. Who is your object of love? Scriptures give 3 definitions for God, depending upon the maturity and intellectual caliber of the seeker. Scriptures are very practical. We will set 3 levels of definition directed towards people of 3 levels. The first definition of God is the creator of the universe. In Sanskrit, Jagat Karta Ishwar. We present a simple and easily understandable reasoning. What is that? Any well-designed product must have an intelligent being behind it or design it. The more well-designed it is, the more you appreciate the designing intelligence. This is why new products are coming with new designs so that you will be tempted to buy. So if an ordinary product requires a conscious, intelligent being behind the creation, what to talk of the most wonderful universe, which is so well designed and very purposeful. Some person defined a weed. A weed is a plant whose purpose is not yet discovered. It is not useless, but we have not yet discovered its use. That means nothing is purposeless in the creation. If the creation is purposeful and well designed, there will be an intelligent creator behind it. That intelligent creator is Jagat Karta Ishwar. Once I identify Ishwar as Jagat Karta, I will visualize God as a person because the only intelligent being known to us is a human being. Therefore, we imagine a very intelligent personal God who's omniscient and omnipotent. Since we do not see him around, we safely place him above the clouds. He's also safe. We are also safe. Let it be he or she. We have got both. This is God as a creator, as a personal God with a special form. Ram, Krishna, Vishnu, Shiv, etc. are the personal form of God as a creator. I will call this God Ekrupa Ishwar. God with a specific form. This is for the beginner. Second definition of God. Once you're grown up sufficiently and capable of thinking further, the scriptures present the next level of Ishwar. God is the cause of the world. Jagat Karnam Ishwar. Earlier,
Karanam.
Yeah.
Karanam.
Yeah.
Karanam.
I mean, I forgot what line tha. Jagat Karanam Ishwar. Earlier, Jagat Karta Ishwar, and now Jagat Karanam Ishwar. How do we introduce that? It is like this. Suppose I understand God as a creator of the world. The question comes regarding the raw material out of which the world is created. Any creator can create something only with the raw material. Carpenter requires wood as raw material. Builder requires iron, wood, bricks, etc. as raw material. Therefore, without raw material, nothing can be created. If I understand God as a creator of the whole universe, what was the raw material? Nothing else is available because before the creation of the world, God alone was there, none else. Even space was not there. So what to talk of things? Scientists say that before the Big Bang, we can't even conceive of time and space. You can talk about them after the Big Bang, not before. Therefore, before the creation of time and space and object, when God alone was there, where is the raw material? So scriptures point out that God himself happens to be the very material also out of which the world is shaped. And we say God is a Karanam, the very material out of which the world is created. The scriptures gives an example also. Just as a spider finds a material for its web in itself, God creates out of himself. We despise a spider because it is a beautiful example useful for Vedanta. It does not take any material from anywhere, unlike a bird or an ant or a human being. It finds a material in itself. Similarly, God is the material cause of the universe. The material alone becomes manifold product. Since God is the raw material, God alone has become the universe. Therefore, the universe is nothing but God alone. So, where is God? The whole universe is God. Since the whole universe is God, every form is God's form. He is no more a personal God. He's universal God. He is no more Ekrupa Ishwar. He is Anekrupa Ishwar or Vishwarup Ishwar. To have darshan of God, I need not go up to the sky. He is available everywhere. In Rudram, Lord Shiva is worshipped as a rising sun with different hues. All the different hues of the sun are the complexion of the Lord. This is the second definition. The third definition of God. First, I say God created the world. Then I say God became the world. Once you're ready for the next level, the scriptures give the third definition. That is Jagat Adhishtanam Ishwar. This is the highest, the toughest, and is a culmination. When we say God has become everything, you will immediately ask, Swamiji, there are ugly things, the diseases, criminals, etc. in the creation. Are they also God? Suppose I say yes, no devotion will be there. How can I accept the evil as God? If such a question comes, we are ready for the third definition. God does not become the world. God appears as a world with different forms. He is not affected by any form in which he appears. To put it another way, God is a very substratum of all the forms. He transcends the entire creation. God is the ultimate substratum behind the creation, but not affected by them. He is Jagat Adhishtanam. Since God transcends all these forms of the creation, no particular form belongs to God. Therefore, God is Adhisthana Ishwar, is Arupa Ishwar, that is formless God. Now, what are the three levels? To consolidate in Sanskrit, God is Jagat Karta, Jagat Karanam, Jagat Adhishtanam. In English, God creates the world, first stage of understanding. God becomes the world, second stage of understanding. God appears as the world, third stage of understanding. God has one form, Ekrupa, first stage of understanding. Many forms, Anekarup, second stage of understanding. Formless, Arupa, third stage of understanding. We have to understand all the levels gradually. In the initial stage, I have to go through Ekarupa Bhakti. In the middle stage, my Bhakti is Anekarupa Bhakti. When I reach the final stage, my Bhakti is Arupa Bhakti. When I talk of three stages, remember that the latter one does not replace the former. Arupa Bhakti has Eka and Aneka Rupa Bhakti. Arupa Bhakti includes the other two. They happily worship God with any particular form also. They happily appreciate the Lord as beautiful nature also. One does not replace the other, just as Einsteinian physics does not replace Newtonian physics. Both are valid in their levels. This is the understanding of God that develops in the mind of a seeker as he studies the scriptures. Summing up all the topics discussed above, we have 9 forms of bhakti. The first 3 are Mandar, Madhyam, and Uttam, wherein bhakti is a love for God, Bhavna, Drishtya, Bhakti, Trayam. The next 3 levels are Karma, Rupa, Upasana, Rupa, Jnana, Rupa, Bhakti, wherein bhakti becomes spiritual discipline. Sadhana, Drishti, Bhakti, Trayam. The last 3 are Eka, Aneka, Arupa, Bhakti, depending upon our understanding of God. Devta, Drishtya, Bhakti, Trayam. The word bhakti is used in all these meanings, and therefore we should understand the context and grasp the meaning. This is a very important topic in the scriptures. With this, I conclude the topic of bhakti. Wow, wow. Mind-blowing. Paribhasa, technical terms. Now we shall see a few scriptural terms and concepts which are required for studying any scriptural text. We should have an understanding of these scriptural terms and concepts. In Sanskrit, it is called paribhasa. Paribhasha. Paribhasha means technical terms which are unique to a particular science. The science of medicine has its own particular terms. Similarly, economics or biology or botany have their own technical terms. In the same way, we have technical terms in Vedanta also. Here is an interesting incident to make you realize how a technical term needs specific translation. A person in Delhi built a home without a ceiling. He decided to conduct a housewarming ceremony and invited his friends and relatives. When somebody asked him the reason for building a house without a ceiling, he said that he had read a news item that said that the government was going to put a ceiling on all urban property. He had thought that there was no need on his part to construct the ceiling when the government was offering to help him. He did not realize that the ceiling was different from the first one. Thus, every science has its own jargon. This is true of our scriptural science too. Without understanding those technical terms, if I study the scriptures, it will not be meaningful. To become familiar with these words, let us look into a text called Tattva Bodha and learn the important terms and concepts. Dimples, I can't tell you how anxious I am to learn Tattva Bodha. I don't know if I've read it. I can't remember it now.
You know, Pujya Swamiji has written a brilliant book on Tattva Bodha. It's a little, not very, but slightly high flown. At some point, you should just order it at Aim for Seva. I'll send you the link.
Please, yes.
And
And we can study that also sometime.
Yeah. But actually, now chapter 8 onwards is a summary of Tattva Bodha. The Sadhana Chatushtayam. In fact, that is what, because I told you about this Upanishad that we are doing, because there's so many newcomers. So she has been explaining the qualifications and things like that. And the first word of the Upanishad is Atha. It's talking about the sage who goes to Brahmaji. So
Yeah.
Atha basically translates into thereafter.
Right.
So thereafter what? Because the Upanishad is starting with the word Atha. So she says what it means is that he is already a qualified, an adhikari for the knowledge. So my teacher took that particular word and she's using that to explain the Sadhana Chatushtayam now. That's what's happening. So we still haven't started the Upanishad, you know. So all these you need to know, because then it's much clearer what they're talking about. So
Oh, I'm looking forward, really looking forward.
no, I will send you a couple of the classes, which were very useful, I thought. And
Yes.
I'll send you the link for next Tuesday and I'll remind you on that day.
Thank you. I'm so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's be all blessed on this beautiful Guruvar. Pranam to all our gurus.
Yes.
Om. 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 Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Let there be peace. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you.